Once upon a time, by the edge of a restless sea that whispered secrets to the rocks and cried to the moon in foamy waves, there lived a poor fisherman named Elric. He was not a man of ambition. His life was simple. Rise before the sun, cast his net, bring home whatever the sea was kind enough to give, and sit by the fire with his wife, Marelda, eating fish stew and watching the stars blink awake. Their home was a crooked little cottage built from driftwood and stones, its roof patched with woven reeds and old sailcloth. It creaked in the wind like an old man complaining of his bones, but it stood barely, and it was enough for Elric. Marelda, however, was not like her husband. She did not speak kindly to the wind. She did not thank the sea for its gifts. Her eyes were always elsewhere, on the horizon, on distant ships with sails like silver wings, on the town's tall houses far from the muddy shore. She had once been beautiful in a way that stopped men mid-step, and though time had softened her features and dulled her glow, she carried herself as if the world still owed her something for that beauty. Each morning, while Elric took his net and walked down to the sea, Marelda would stand by the crooked window and sigh, a long theatrical sigh that rolled through the cottage like fog on one such morning, the sky heavy with the smell of rain. Elric went to the sea with no expectation but the usual. He waded into the cool waves, cast his net as he had done 1,000 times before, and waited. But when he pulled the net back in, it did not feel like fish or seaweed or driftwood. It pulsed with something strange, something alive and aware. As the last of the net cleared the water, Elric stumbled backward. Caught in the ropes was a shimmering, golden-scaled fish the size of a small dog. Its eyes were wide and dark, too human to be natural, and it did not flop or struggle. "Good fisherman," the fish said, not with its mouth, but in a voice that seemed to echo inside Elric's head, like a dream he had once forgotten. "Spare me, and I shall grant you a wish." Elric, being a simple man, stared at the fish for a long moment, blinking away the salt in his eyes. Then he gently untangled the net and lowered the strange fish back into the sea. "I don't need anything," he said. "Go and be free." But when he returned to the cottage and told Marelda what had happened, her face twisted as if he had slapped her. "You let it go?" she shrieked. "A wish-granting fish, and you just let it swim away?" Elric scratched his head. "It seemed the right thing to do. It talked, Marelda." "Oh, it talked, did it?" she snapped. "Well, if it's such a polite fish, go and ask it for something useful. Tell it we want a proper house. A cottage with a roof that doesn't leak and a floor that doesn't squeal like a dying mouse." Elric didn't argue. He had long since learned that Marelda's voice was louder than his logic. So he walked back to the shore, where the waves still rolled and the fish was nowhere to be seen. But he stood at the water's edge and called out in a voice that felt silly coming from his lips. "Golden fish of the sea," he said, "my wife is not pleased. She says we need a better house. If you are still there, and your promise holds, then, well, I'd be thankful." The sea bubbled once, twice, and then stilled. When Elric returned home, the crooked shack was gone. In its place stood a modest stone cottage with a thatched roof, real windows with glass, and a chimney that smoked like it belonged there. Marelda clapped her hands with glee, walking through each room as if she had built it herself. For a week, they lived in peace. Elric fished, Marelda cleaned and cooked with less complaint, and the sea looked kindly upon them. But Marelda's eyes soon wandered again. "Why should we live in this peasant's house?" she muttered one morning. "There's a manor up the road with 20 rooms and horses in the stable. Go back to your fish. Tell it we want that instead." Elric hesitated. "It already gave us something, and it can give more. Go." So once more, the fisherman stood by the shore and whispered into the waves. "Golden fish of the sea," he said, "my wife is unhappy again. She desires a manor now. If it's not too much." The fish rose once from the water, nodded without words, and was gone. When Elric returned, a manor stood where the cottage had been. Tall windows, marble floors, servants in neat rows. None of it felt real. Marelda, dressed in velvet and pearls, walked with her nose in the air, and hosted afternoon teas with ladies who spoke in foreign tongues. Elric, uncomfortable in fine clothes, still walked to the sea each morning. He did not fish anymore. Marelda said it was beneath them now, but he stood and watched the waves and wondered if the fish ever regretted making that promise. A month passed. Then two. And Marelda grew restless once again. "What use is a manor if we have no title?" she said one morning. "The Baron laughed at me. Laughed. I want to be a duchess. Tell the fish. Go." Elric's heart ached as he walked back to the sea. The wind had changed. The air smelled sharper, colder. He stood where the sand met the foam and whispered, "Golden fish, my wife wants to be a duchess now." The fish came and went. When he returned, there was a castle. Real stone, tall towers, guards at every door. Marelda now wore a crown of gold and looked through everyone like they were insects on glass. She ordered people about with a flick of her wrist. Elric dined in silence, a stranger in the house that bore his name only on paper. The sea grew darker with each wish. The fish came slower, its shimmer dulled, its voice quieter. Elric knew it, but Marelda would not see. "I want to be queen," she declared one thunderous night. Elric said nothing, only walked to the sea in silence. "Golden fish," he whispered, "my wife wants to be queen." The storm rolled in, waves thrashing like beasts. The fish did not rise, but the sea hissed in reply. When Elric returned, the land around the castle had changed. The village had disappeared. The people bowed. Marelda sat on a throne that scraped the clouds, and her eyes were colder than ever. She had everything now, everything but joy. Days passed, then weeks. "I am queen," Marelda said, "but I am still mortal. What good is a crown if time can take it from me? Go, ask the fish. I want to be a goddess." Elric stared at her, his voice thin and worn. "Please, Marelda, you have everything. Let us stop." "Go," she said, and her voice echoed like steel. Elric walked to the sea for the last time. The wind screamed. The water churned like madness. He whispered, "Golden fish, my wife desires godhood. Please, no more." The sea split with a roar, and the fish rose, dull and broken, its eyes hollow. "No," it said, and then the sea swallowed everything. When Elric opened his eyes, he was lying on the shore, soaked and shivering. He stood and ran back to the place where the castle once stood. It was gone. The village was gone. The cottage was gone. Only ruins remained, and Marelda was nowhere to be found. Elric built himself a small hut from the debris. He fished quietly, gave thanks to the sea, and spoke to no one but the wind. And somewhere, deep in the water, a golden fish rested in silence, no longer granting wishes. Bother marking a calendar or measuring the moons. The sea was his clock, the wind his only companion. Where once a grand manor had stood, there was now only silence, broken only by birds crying over the broken stones. Marelda was gone. No sign, no trace, not even a footprint in the wet earth. Elric searched the nearby hills, the blackened forest edge, even walked through the old market road where vendors once cheered his arrival with fresh bread and dried fish. Everything was empty now, abandoned as if time itself had been reset. He dreamed of the fish often. It no longer spoke in riddles or promises. In his dreams, it stared at him from the darkness beneath the waves, its eyes glowing like coals underwater. Sometimes it whispered Marelda's name. Sometimes it said nothing, just circled and circled until Elric woke up gasping for air. Tangled in his blankets like the old nets he no longer used, he stopped eating meat, stopped sleeping in the hut most nights. He built a shrine near the edge of the cliff where the waves smashed themselves to death below, piling white stones in the shape of a fish, always facing the sea. Every morning he left a piece of bread or an apple or a carved wooden toy. He didn't know why, only that it felt like a debt owed. Months blurred into seasons. The sea remained angry, churning violently even on windless days. Villagers from beyond the ridge whispered of a curse. Sailors no longer docked on the beach. Even birds gave the bay a wide berth. Elric stayed. It wasn't loyalty. It was guilt. Then, one morning, the tide receded strangely far. So far it pulled the ocean floor back, revealing shipwrecks that hadn't seen sunlight in 100 years. Dead fish lay gasping on the wet sand. Crabs scuttled in circles. The horizon shimmered with something unnatural. Elric stood at the edge and waited. He knew something was returning. The fish did not rise, but a voice echoed, this time not from the sea, but from behind him. "You look older," it said. Elric turned slowly. There stood Marelda. But it was not her. She wore the same long dress she had on the night she demanded godhood, but it no longer flowed like velvet. It was torn and soaked with sea brine. Her skin was pale, almost blue, and her eyes, they were like the fish's, dark, deep, infinite. And her smile was not one Elric remembered. "I waited for you to come back," he whispered. "I never left," she said, voice cold as winter water. "You just stopped seeing." Elric's knees gave and he fell to the sand. "What are you?" She stepped closer, her feet leaving no prints. "I am what you allowed me to become. I reached too far. But it was your hands that opened. The way I only did what you asked." "No," she said gently. "You did what you feared not to do." Her form began to shift. Her skin shimmered like scales. Her fingers lengthened, twisted. Her hair unraveled into kelp. She was becoming the sea itself. "You must end it," she said. "Elric," she whispered again, her voice suddenly fragile. "It never wanted to grant wishes. It only did so because you believed it could. You believed, and your belief poisoned the water. Every wish you made did not change the world. It broke it." Elric rose to his feet. "What can I do? The sea is sick, and the sickness is inside you." She held out her hand. "You must go to the place where the sea meets the sky. There you will find the truth of the fish and what it once was." He took her hand, and suddenly he was no longer on the shore, that he was falling through memories that weren't his, images of the fish before it was a fish, before it was cursed. It had once been a guardian of balance, a watcher beneath the waves, a protector. But then, a man cast a net and caught it, asking for nothing but kindness. That man had been rewarded, but others came, greedy ones, violent ones. The wishes twisted, the fish changed, became bound to the desires of mortals, became a prisoner of want, became a mirror for the worst in people. Elric landed on stone. He stood on a cliff in a place where the sea ended and the sky began, a place outside time. Before him was the fish, larger now, scaled with stars, its eyes weeping. "You came," it said. "I understand now," Elric replied. "You were never meant to serve us." The fish nodded slowly. "But I did, and now I am broken. What can be done?" The fish opened its mouth, and inside was a pearl the size of a heart. "Take this. Return it to the depths. Return it to where you first cast the net." Elric reached out and took the pearl. It was warm, achingly warm, like holding a fading memory. The moment he touched it, the cliff crumbled, and the sea returned in a roar. He awoke on the old shore again, the pearl in his palm. That he walked to the place where he had first caught the fish, years ago, where the rocks formed a crescent, and the water ran deeper than anywhere nearby. He waded in, chest deep, holding the pearl. He whispered, "I'm sorry," and then he let it go. The sea paused, then it inhaled, then it exhaled, and everything changed. The sky brightened, the clouds parted, the waves softened, birds returned, cawing as if in celebration. In the distance, the village that had vanished reappeared, houses intact, smoke curling from chimneys. Children's laughter floated on the wind. The forest turned green again. Life returned. Elric stumbled back onto the shore, exhausted. The shrine he had built collapsed behind him, its purpose fulfilled that night. He sat beside a fire outside a cottage that looked oddly familiar. The same crooked walls, the old thatched roof patched with sailcloth. He smiled, and then he heard a soft footstep. That he turned. Marelda stood there. Not dressed in jewels, not crowned, but in a simple linen dress, barefoot, her eyes clear and calm. "I remember now," she said. "So do I." She sat beside him. They did not speak again that night. They just listened to the sea, to the wind, to the silence that was not empty but full of peace. And deep beneath the waves, the golden fish swam freely once more, no longer bound by wishes, no longer cursed by belief, just a guardian, watching, waiting, and never forgotten. Years passed. Elric and Marelda lived quietly by the sea. They grew old together, not with riches, but with gentleness. Each morning, Elric rose before the sun and walked the shoreline, not with a net, but with a wooden staff he carved himself. He would watch the waves roll in, hear the gulls cry, and nod his thanks to the waters. Marelda tended to a small garden behind the house. She planted herbs and wildflowers, always singing to them in a voice softened by time and sorrow. The bitterness that once ruled her spirit had long washed away with the tide. She never again asked for anything but sunlight and rain, and even those she welcomed as they came. But though peace had returned, the legend of the fish had not died. The villagers told stories in hushed tones around firelight, about a fisherman who had once spoken to a golden fish, who had seen his wife made queen, then goddess, and who had brought ruin and rebirth with a single pearl. Children carved fish into driftwood. Elders warned curious youth to never wish for more than what was needed. Some believed the fish still lived in the deep trench beyond the crescent rocks. Others said it had turned to starlight and left the world entirely. One summer, when the sky hung pale and cloudless for days, a stranger arrived in the village. She was no more than 16, barefoot, with eyes the color of river stones and a necklace of sea glass. She said her name was Aelith, and that she had walked from a land beyond the deserts, following a dream of water and light. The villagers eyed her with suspicion, but Elric invited her to his table without question. "You dreamed of the sea?" he asked that evening, as Marelda poured her warm tea and the fire cracked beside them. "I dreamed of a fish," she said. "It was not just a fish. It spoke to me in silence. It showed me a place, a choice, and I knew I had to find it." Elric closed his eyes. The ocean wind curled through the open windows like a breath from something ancient. "It's still out there, isn't it?" she whispered. Elric nodded slowly. "It is, but it sleeps, and it must never be awoken by hunger." Aelith said nothing for a long time. Then she stood and walked to the shore. She did not wade into the water. She only stood watching, her hair rippling in the breeze. That night, she stayed in the spare room. Marelda tucked an extra quilt around her and whispered an old lullaby by morning. Aelith was gone. There were no footprints in the sand, no broken twigs, nothing but a ring of sea glass placed on the windowsill and a folded note written in a language Elric had not seen in decades. Ancient runes of the deep folk, the ones who had once guarded the border between land and water. That he burned the note without reading it aloud. He understood the message anyway. It had begun again. But this time it would be different. Time moved forward. Elric and Marelda grew slower in their steps, gentler in their touch. The world continued to spin and the village thrived. Children grew, houses multiplied, and boats returned to the docks, brave enough once more to sail the waters of the Crescent Bay. Then, one autumn evening, Elric stood by the sea, the sky aflame with red and gold, and felt a sharp stillness in his chest. He did not panic. He did not fear. He turned back to look at the little house one last time. Marelda was in the garden, her hair silver in the sunset. He raised one hand in farewell. Then he stepped into the sea. He walked forward, deeper and deeper, the water rising past his knees, his chest, his shoulders. He did not flinch when it reached his mouth. He breathed as though it were air, and then he was gone. No one found his body. Only his staff washed ashore, tangled in seaweed, and a single golden scale embedded in the wood. Marelda wept not in sorrow but in gratitude. She knew he had returned home. The villagers held a feast in his honor, retelling the story of the fisherman and the fish once more. But this time, they added a new ending, the tale of how belief had become wisdom, how hunger had given way to healing. Years became decades. Children became elders. The legend endured, and one day, a young boy named Kale, born of a woman who claimed to have once walked from a far desert, stood on the edge of the sea with a carved wooden boat in his hand. The boat bore the symbol of a fish on its sail. He whispered, If you're still there, I only ask to understand. And for a moment, the sea glowed. Not brightly, not loudly, just a shimmer, just enough. Deep below the waves, the golden fish stirred, not with pain, nor with hunger, but with purpose. It remembered Elric. It remembered Marelda. It remembered the pearl that had been returned, the silence that had followed, the balance that had been restored. That it swam once in a circle, slow and graceful, and watched the boat drift above. Not all who seek must suffer. Not all who wish must destroy. That it would wait, as it always had. Not for greed, not for worship, but for one who would listen. And so, the sea remained vast, and the legend lived on, not as a warning, not as a curse, but as a promise, that once, a fisherman loved his wife so deeply he nearly broke the world, and then healed it.